Okay, good afternoon, everyone. It's 3:34 p.m. I'm calling this meeting of the Maple Broadband Executive Committee to order for July 11th, 2024. We're not going back in time, I promise. The first thing on the agenda is to approve the agenda. I would like to request an addition of an agenda item at the beginning of 6. Maybe we'll call it AA, which is a discussion of the our network inspection being done by Luckgrove. Don't worry, it's not bad news. Not exactly, at least. So
I move we approve the agenda with the addition as specified by Ellie.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Great. That's all of you. Okay, next up is approval of the minutes from June 20th and June 27th. So those have been distributed to you. I believe them both to be an accurate reflection of what happened in those meetings. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Move to, go ahead, Nancy.
We got motion and second.
Motion from Shannon and a second from Nancy for the minutes. Thank you. So, all right, any comments on that?
Nope.
Okay, all in favor of approving as presented, raise your hand or say aye. All right, and that's everyone. So next up is public comment. Would anyone like to make a public comment? We do have a member of the public here, which is Doug Adams. All right, hearing none. Doug Adams
Sorry,
is from...
I don't know if I'm muted. Am I muted?
You're no longer muted, Doug.
Okay.
You may speak.
Hi. I just am here to answer any questions if there's any questions, and I guess so. I don't want to be a burden.
Okay. Doug is from one of our marketing shortlist companies.
Oh.
Okay. So next up, then, would anyone else like to make a public comment? Sorry, before I move on. Okay, hearing none, I'm going to move on. So the executive director report, I have some very good news that, as you guys know, I've been constantly reporting that we're waiting to get the BEAD data into a format where we can actually look at it. And hallelujah, we got that 2 days ago. And so I had a look at it. I sent it to Steve. Actually, it was only 1 day ago, but it feels like 2 days ago, given all the things we've done with it. So that is really exciting to be able to see what are the addresses that are remaining. And it is kind of, as I suppose in some ways, it's either a best case or worst case scenario, depending on your point of view, but there's a lot of addresses in there that maybe theoretically could have been challenged, because I think Fidium has service there, but for whatever reason, they chose not to challenge. So that gives us a scope of where we can go. So it's a lot of North Middlebury, south part of New Haven. There's a handful of addresses in Ripton. Breadloaf campus, hilariously, is marked as a bunch of BSLs, and then there's a couple things in downtown Middlebury as well as everything that we expect up in our phase 2 zone around Virgins. So that's great, and then that unlocks what again we've been talking about doing for a very long time, which is working to understand which engineering firm we are going to work with going forward. So Steve and I had a call talking about that, and we're putting together a plan, and we really want to do our diligence in terms of understanding our choices and come back with some indicative pricing for a decision as quickly as we possibly can, potentially as early as 2 weeks from now, but it really all depends on how fast we can get the information, because we want to move quickly, but not so quickly that we are not operating on the basis of good data. Is there anything you want to add to that, Steve? While I'm there?
You're good.
Okay. And so Nancy, did you have a question?
Yeah, just a question. So when you look at the addresses that are eligible for BEAD funding through us, were there any surprises? Was it about what you expected? Is the volume of addresses about what you expected or hoped?
It was what I hoped, because we've seen the preliminary list of addresses from before the challenge process, but it wasn't entirely clear how many of those were actually challenged and which challenges would be upheld and whatnot. And just because the public map wasn't updated to show that they'd been challenged didn't necessarily mean that they hadn't been challenged, maybe on the last day or something like that. So So I think, presuming that we're successful in our BEAD bid, this is actually good news because it gives us reason to put out tentacles into a bunch of areas and get some grant funding to do it. So
Great.
I think it's all good. There's nothing bad. Nothing bad with that at all. So the other thing in my executive director report is obviously we have on the agenda for later today a decision on the marketing RFP. And what I wanted to say is my executive summary is we had shortlists, we had interviews with 2 shortlisted candidates earlier this week. And I honestly think that either of them would be a massive step up from what we have today, both in terms of quality and reduction of cost. So I am really, really, really excited by this process. I think we have 2 solid choices, and it is really great to have gone through this. And I am just so excited. This day has been, I've been waiting for this for a very long time. So looking forward to making some changes and getting some improvement in our marketing. So the other thing that I'm doing obviously is now with these BEAD addresses, there is so we talked about engaging the engineering firms, but the next thing is even just knowing what and where they are. And this feeds into the work that Noah's been doing around trying to make the GIS world feed in a more automated way into our financial model. But that's going to be that's going to be my focus of, say, the next month or so, is figuring out who we need on the engineering side and working on refining these costs, as well as that we're now very, very close to the end of our phase 2 construction, which means that I can do the tally up to understand how much money we have left and how best to spend that. Because again, as we've talked about conceptually, we have the world which is BEAD eligible and routes necessary to get there. And then we have other things that are just completely ineligible that we need to pay for with private funding. And then we have other parts that are ARPA eligible. So trying to figure out what to do with the remainder of the ARPA funds, as well, by the way, as how to work with the VCBB to make sure that we have the proper authority to use those funds in that manner. Which is a bit of an interesting one because we're under budget, we have extra money, and I'm not sure they really anticipated that. or someone being under budget to the degree that we are. So we have to figure out what to do because, what you don't want to do is sign another grant agreement for $0 and potentially be over budget and not able to fulfill it. So I'm gonna work through with them to say, okay, guys, we've talked before conceptually we're under budget. We need to figure out how we put together the proper authority to let us continue to spend this money under the rules of Act 71 and the construction grant program. And obviously you can inspect what you want, but we just need to work through how that actually works. Okay, and then the final thing I want to say is I have finally managed to book a vacation for myself in late August. So I'm going to be away from the 20th through the 26th. That's a Tuesday to Monday. I'm going up to a little bit west of Ottawa. And so that's that. Want to let you guys know. Any comments or questions on that? I mean, on anything? Not my vacation.
What's up? What's up in Ottawa? What's up there?
What's up in Ottawa is a friend of mine that I haven't seen for, well, I was first thinking it must have been at least 5 years because my kid's 4.5 and she has one kid that's at least 6 months older than mine. But then she pointed out it's been 10 years because it was 10 years ago that she left Cape Town. She was my roommate in Cape Town for a while. She's a Canadian, but she was my roommate in Cape Town for a while. And she married an Egyptian and lived in Egypt, and they're now in Canada. And I wanted to go somewhere, but as you guys also know, my Richard's green card, he's only got like a 2-year green card, which we have to apply to have that converted into a proper permanent green card. But while that's in limbo, it's unclear if he's going to be able to travel internationally. So yeah. I figured that we would just have a little bit of fun and do some international travel while he's clearly able to, enter and exit the country without there being challenges. So
great.
Yep. So we're gonna go. We found a nice place right along the river there, and it's gonna be nice just to have a bit of a change of scenery, even a change of country. Richard's never been to Canada, Maya's never been to Canada, so it'll be fun. If anyone has any idea what to do in Ottawa, I don't know, but at least I have friends there, so we can find out.
People in Canada are very nice. They're nice people up there.
Yeah. Yep. I've spent enough time in Canada, mostly Toronto, but even Toronto, for being like a big hectic city, the people there are super nice. Okay, so Steve, over to you for the chair report, and we have construction status under you, so you can cover that, or if you don't, then I'll cover that under operations or under
Yeah,
updates.
I think the last time we did this, I didn't realize you'd assign this to me, so I apologize.
Well, it's because you kept doing it,
I know,
and then we
sorry.
kept skipping it. So it's
all
now
the fun.
assigned to you.
It's the fun stuff. Why not? So we got a report from WCBT this morning. We're up to 345 subscribers. So I think the pace that we talked about, actually, when I talked to the governing board meeting last night, is 10 give or take per week is what we're adding in. I wish we had more like 20 or 30 a week, but WCBT is a small organization, and we need to give them. We need to accommodate the fact that there's not that many of them, and we're all kind of a hometown effort. So, so that's the extent of
Can I ask
construction.
a question about that?
Sure.
I was thinking about this after our governing board meeting. Is it possible, as we go forward and we're able to find some additional funds that can be shared with WCBT, those funds like BEAD funds that they may be eligible for through us can be used to fund installations, right?
BEAD funds can, yes.
So I guess I just wonder about whether they have all their Northeast Kingdom problems to deal with too, but I just wonder if your sense of things is that they may be thinking about staffing up in the installation for installation purposes to speed up the installation, because when they talk to us about their plans going forward, it's really exciting to know when their build is done, but until they're doing installations along that build, it doesn't mean anything to the people who've been waiting.
Well, general broad comment, Nancy, is that one thing that I appreciate that WCBT is doing is it's a lot of work to be done, and it's not just the drops, it's a lot more work. And so what they've chosen to do is keep their talent doing the most important stuff that they can, because that important stuff would be leaving a good impression with our subscribers, which means where they're focusing their own talent is in the installation of the service, the last step. Put a drop in, get a third party, get a subcontractor to do that work. It's okay. If they're not left with that good an impression, I guess it's too bad. We're going to try to make that better. But when it comes to actually the face-to-face contact with the subscriber and helping them understand how to use the network for the first time, they're limiting that to their staff only, full-time equivalents, employees. And so I don't want to change that. I don't want them if in hiring more people, well, they're going to have to fire them in about a year or two after all this gets done. So that's going to be a hard one to sell as well. So I think that one of the mixed blessings about our relationship with WCBT is that personal touch that I think is really important to maintain.
I'm just wishing, obviously, that the installation process could be faster without sacrificing quality.
Yeah, I think it's an understandable wish, Nancy, but I think realistically, if we think about what's actually involved, I was thinking about this a little bit as well. Remember when we bid out phase 1A, and the way that Vantage Point did it was they bid out the main line and all of the service entrances, which is all of the drops. And the cost of the service entrances was literally double the cost of the main line, and it would have extended the time. So if you think about it like that, if you're actually connecting every subscriber, if our phase 1A is indicative of anything, your cost and probably your time frame is at least double, because there's complexity when you go into private property as well. So think about this as essentially equivalent effort to building mainline, maybe not as much as double, but at least as much as building mainline, and that might help contextualize why they said to set expectations. If we build mainline 1 year, we're not going to get everyone connected until the next year. It's not, it's not a minor thing.
Right, it isn't. That's for sure.
Yeah. And to Steve's point as well, if it's something like that, which is a temporary bump, it doesn't necessarily make sense to bring on your own staff. It does make, I mean, to me, similar to what we're doing, it makes sense to outsource to good contractors and then keep whatever really makes sense, that tip of the spear, to staff. Okay.
Yeah, so one other item, Ellie, and then we can move on.
Yeah.
So one of the matters that Ellie and I have been talking about recently has been the pace that Maple Broadband has had since the beginning, which is move fast, speed to market, get the infrastructure out as quickly as we can. So a lot of everything we've done to date, sometimes we've done multiple initiatives in parallel, which probably would be best done serially, but we do those things if and when we have to in order to move quickly. And I think it's really proven to be a good solution. And I've been chomping at the bit about what we do as we move into this BEAD process and the concerns that it took us. It will have taken, if all goes as we think it will have taken about 7 months for us to lock down the hub in Leicester. It's just taken a long, long time. There's been like 4 different mailing lists, long time. And I wanted to do the same kind of thing while also trying to lock down the central hub and so forth. And Ellie was informed me that was a very expensive way to do things. And we really can't afford to keep blundering our way forward and doing the best we can. We need to be a little bit more deliberate. And I'm sure, Ellie, you can probably expand on this better than I. But I think basically what we're going to do is we're not going to engage a lot of construction work until we know where our physical presence is going to be in our new territories. In other words, we need to get that nailed down, and it's not just this is probably where it's going to be. We need to get it signed up. So wherever we're going to put our central hub in Middlebury, for example, we don't really want to engage a lot of engineering until we have that. We're comfortable that it's ours, and that could take a long time. So that basically inserts delay that gives me hives. I hate having that because it means for maybe the next 6 months, as the work that we're doing now tapers off, maybe in the next month or two, we're going to be done with construction for months while we're locking down what we need to lock down for our next construction phase. So I kind of wanted to give everyone a heads up that that's the way it's going to work. I'm fully in support of it. I understand it. We only have so much money, and we really want to stretch it as far as we can, very, very productively. So that's kind of the overall approach. But just wanted to make sure you understood that we're going to have a quiet period here. Syracuse Utilities is going to go away. We may have to bid it out. We may not get them to do the next work we do and so forth. There's a lot of things that may have to happen, but I think it's the right thing for us to do because we just have limited funds. Is there any questions on that?
Yeah, so the Leicester hub is close to finalized or not?
Close.
It's close.
Close.
We're there's a 30-day statutory public notice period for the conveyance of town property.
Yeah.
So
okay.
we're in that period.
And then after that, there's a 15-day zoning thing.
And have we made some progress on the Middlebury piece, or is that, I know Jeff was going to work on that a bit.
I think we're right where I would love us to be, being anxious to move fast. Ellie just received communication back from Matt Curran, who is our contact at Middlebury College. She and I are meeting Matt on Monday morning. So there's the college piece. I've already done some research on what little I can on figuring out what would work on college property. So that would be something we could introduce to him and see where that goes, which may go a completely different route. And then I also went through about a week or two ago, on the ground analysis down figuring out what would be good spots in Middlebury, kind of say within about 1 mile radius of the central spot that BPS thought we should go. And so I assembled a list of 28 properties and Ellie helped me refine the communication to those potential prospects, and they were sent on to be issued. I don't know that they will, but I think we're hoping that they'll all be in the mail by the end of this week. And so, timing is unknown, and if we get any responses, it's unknown, but it's adequately detailed that if we get a phone call, we're half the way there because they're going to know a lot up front of what we're going to do. So, it's less about instructing them on what we do and more about how much is it going to cost to get an easement or something like that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Anything else for your chair report, Steve?
Nope.
Okay. All right. So moving on. So the first thing that we've now added under 6 is discussing our network inspection. So as you guys know, one of the terms of our grant agreements with the Vermont Community Broadband Board is that once we finish completion, they have the right to inspect the network to make sure that we have in fact built what we said we were going to build and have built it to the proper specs, including their outside plant requirements. And of course, the grant also includes certain things like how many miles and passings we're going to build, which they would presumably want to be checking. So as you know, we finished that in February, and we told them we finished it in February. We didn't hear anything for a very long time, so I sent them an invoice, and I didn't hear anything for another very long time. And then finally, they appointed an inspection firm. So that's great, because now there's been a firm appointed. And the firm has started work. We provided them with a bunch of materials. They've sent some people up on site. We had our check-in. We had a first check-in call with them this morning, in which they presented. They presented that they've so far everything that they've seen has been really, really good. They have what in typical construction terms you'd think of as a punch list of like really minor items, like a riser's missing, or some cable is loose, or like a third-party attacher is low over the railroads, when we're on the same crossing. So things like that. So putting together the punch list, and what we spoke about with Syracuse and Mission today is that once they have the punch list, their mission's going to review it and determine if items on the punch list are out of spec according to the requirements that Vantage Point communicated. If they're out of spec, Syracuse will remediate them. So I mean, I said that to Syracuse as you will do this, and they didn't push back because that's what they should be doing. And we have agreement on that point. And then items that were not part of the Vantage Point spec, we'll talk about, and either we'll push back if we don't think it's a proper thing or it's a minor thing, or we will have it fixed probably at our own cost and expense if it was something that simply wasn't thought of, which will be a good lesson learned for the future. That, however, wasn't what I want to talk about. What I want to talk about was in the course of the meeting, it came about that the Vermont Community Broadband Board did not provide this network inspection firm. They're called Luckgrove. So the VCBB did not provide them with a map or any sort of information about the scope of what they're meant to be inspecting. And so they asked us to provide it. And they were very clear that they didn't get anything like that from the VCBB. And Lee Cheney and I both expressed some surprise at this. And I wanted to raise it here, first of all, for visibility, but second of all, to let you guys know, I plan to raise this with the VCBB in our private one-to-one meeting on Wednesday of next week, because we have a monthly meeting with them. I plan to raise this, and probably I feel like it would be a good idea to put something in writing in a memo to them, because maybe Luckgrove simply misunderstood. But if it is in fact the case that they did not misunderstand and the VCBB did not give them a scope of what they're meant to be inspecting, that is really a problem in my mind, because we could tell these inspectors any old thing. And, like if we're meant to build 200 miles and we say inspect these 75 and they look good, I mean, like that's a loophole the size of a barn. And we need to make sure, just from a, public accountability standpoint, that having discovered such a thing, we validate it. And if it is in fact true, we formally express our concerns to them. So that's what I have to say. Anything you want to add, Steve? Because you were on the same call.
Yeah, I think I have a little hesitation about putting your foot down too hard. This could just be, if everyone, including VCBB, is juggling a lot of things, which I believe they are, I think that it's demonstrated the fact that they don't do any of it very well. I think that this could just simply the result of one oversight. And do we want to make a significant issue what might be a mistake that, say, Rob Fish made? Is that
well? That's
good use of our influence?
Well, that's why before sending the memo, I want to speak with them in private about it. because if this was simply a mistake, to your point, it's not a big deal. If this was like, oh no, we don't need to do that because we trust our grantees, I think that is
Yeah.
a big deal because I mean the state auditor would have hives and and not all grantees are Maple Broadband, right? I mean, I'm not saying like don't trust other CUDs or other grantees, but for the state broadband office to allow the grantee to define to the company which is doing the inspection, the scope of the inspection, does not seem right. And I feel like if there could be something that comes back on us if we don't say anything, and if this is later uncovered as a scandal or something like that. So let's just if this isn't a mistake, let's just advise them how we think it should be, and that's
I
it. I
like
mean,
it.
it's not our job to fix it; it's our job to raise our concerns about it. That's it.
Perfect.
Okay, so that's that. Anything else on that lovely subject? Okay, moving on. Marketing RFP decision. So I suppose the good thing about having 3 out of 5 executive committee members here is that 2 of the 3 participated directly in these interviews and can fill Shannon in on their views and what we learned. Like I said earlier in my executive director report, I think we have 2 very good choices, and I think just to paint a little bit more of a picture, the first one we interviewed was London Middlebury. So it's a Vermont-based firm, and the founder is actually from Addison County, from Middlebury, I think. And they're based in Winooski, and we would be their first broadband client. They don't really know anything about broadband, but we did ask them about how they would come up to speed on a technology or a new space, and I think that they answered credibly. But basically, we have a firm that's a very good marketing firm, good track record, but that doesn't know broadband. And then the other firm is called Broadband Marketers, and they're out of Colorado. And they're the exact opposite, which is a firm that understands broadband really, really well, and what drives take rates and customer touch points and how to convert people over to fiber and sell the benefits of broadband. So they already know how to market broadband, but they don't know Addison County, they don't know our market, so they would need to come up to speed on that. So I think both firms have some coming up to speed to do. I think I was also interested that they both answered some similar questions really similarly. Like, I mean, they both had the same immediate gut check response when we asked how to make our website better, and they both said, take off those ridiculous stock photos and put on something local, which is like, yes, obvious, but I'm like, that's great because that's something that we haven't gotten to date. So hallelujah. Back to what I said earlier in my executive director report, that I honestly think that either would be a big step up and a solid choice. So I think with that, I will turn over to Steve and Nancy for their thoughts.
Yeah, Ellie, I think it would be helpful for Shannon, and it might also be helpful for our guest, to kind of review the process that got us to where we are now. And in particular, I was looking on the parking lot, and you removed it from the parking lot. But my recollection is that this came up 6 to 8 months ago. This was an
Nope, it's still there.
initiative that.
It's number 4, 11/17/2023.
Okay, so look, and that's kind of what I was trying to say, is that this has been a long time in the process, and Ellie it's been, as much as important as it obviously is to Ellie, it's also taken a backseat to a lot of other more important initiatives, and I have no complaints about that. But I think what might be helpful, Ellie, is once we decided to prepare a list of bidders, perhaps you could kind of expand on how you prepared the list of bidders, and perhaps how many bidders there were, and anything else about the bid process to get us to where we are now.
Yeah, sure. So, so how we got to where we are, actually, Steve did quite a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of coming up with the bidders list. So he reached out to Phil Summers, who's the executive director of the Addison County Chamber of Commerce, and as you guys know, because we discussed it before, has quite the extensive marketing background, including for large organizations like, say, the National Football League. Not to name drop, but he obviously knows a lot about what he's doing. So he gave us some recommendations. I think he also directed you, Steve, to the list of state approved vendors as at least a starting point, and then he pulled out a couple that he said that he recommended. So that was where you started your list, is from the list of state approved vendors that were comprehensive. And then I think we added a couple to that. And then broadband marketers is one that I added to the list because they were recommended by an industry contact of mine.
Right. So as Ellie said, well, most recently, literally most recently, this meeting is at 3:30. The meeting that we held a post interview review, Ellie, Nancy, and I at 3 o'clock this afternoon, right before today's call, and we did a quick review. And I think ultimately, from Nancy's and my perspective, London Middlebury stood head and shoulders above broadband marketers. To one large degree, preparedness for the presentation, they were far more prepared for that presentation. Broadband marketers, I'm not sure that they reviewed our environment very well because it seemed like they really weren't prepared at all. So I think it left a bad taste in both Nancy's and my mouth. I also I felt that even some of the questions that we asked the broadband marketers, which we also asked essentially the same set of questions of London Middlebury, we didn't seem to get really direct answers to some of the things we wanted to know. For example, we wanted to know how many employees they had after the completion of the interview. I'm not sure how many employees they had. I think they have one employee and one contractor, but we needed to keep moving. We only had an hour. We needed to get going. And actually this interview was yesterday. And so it started at 4, and at 5, as you are well aware, 5 o'clock was our governing board meeting.
Tuesday, Steve, not yesterday.
Oh, I'm sorry. And so we needed to, we only had an hour, and literally we had to get off that call because we had another call right on the back end of it. So we did the best we could. We tried to move the process along to ensure that all the questions we had got answers, and there were quite a few. I think we said 16 questions for broadband marketers, and probably the same quantity from London Middlebury. They weren't all the same, but some of them were identical. So ultimately, I think we were. I was impressed by London Middlebury. I can also say that they mentioned a project schedule, and we asked for a sample of it. They sent us a thoughtful package with some gorgeous project schedules for previous customers, and they'd taken some time to prepare that information because they didn't want to have it related to the individual customer or client. So they were anonymized, where they just had in brackets customer or something like that. And they're just gorgeous packages, visually gorgeous and detailed, clearly well thought out. So it seemed like a real contrast to me between what we were getting from broadband marketers versus London Middlebury. So I felt pretty strongly that we were going in the right direction, and that's kind of where I came from. Nancy, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Well, yeah, we did push on London Middlebury about the fact that we would be their first broadband customer, and they gave some good examples of different clients that they had where they really had to come up to speed and didn't know much about the industry. One was about a client who was in the mining industry, which was something very new to them, and so they give some great examples of how they come up to speed quickly, and the kinds of steps they take to do that. So given the deep knowledge that they have about Addison County, and they have a number of Addison County clients already, so they're already pretty familiar. The principal of the company actually grew up in New Haven. Anyway, so we thought we really do think they're going to be able to get up to speed very quickly and do a thorough job for us. They really seem to understand all the many different ways to get the information quickly that they need to advise us and make develop strategy and implementation plans for us and with us.
Yeah.
The only thing,
Go ahead.
yeah, I was going to say the only thing to add to that, I mean, I do feel like both firms would have the ability to come up to speed on the piece that they wouldn't, because the thing with broadband marketers, they have to fly people here from out of state to really understand our market, and they're willing to do that. They would do that. So I think, just in fairness, I think that they could come up to
Yep.
speed on what they don't know just as well. And the one thing I want to share with you, Shannon, that I did say to Steve and Nancy is that I think probably the most compelling thing that broadband marketers does bring to the table is that experience actually well, I shouldn't say experience, but a successful track record of selling broadband and getting people's take rates up, which fundamentally is the most important thing, is getting take rates up, right?
Yeah.
And I think the most compelling thing that they said was, another marketing firm, sure, they'll learn broadband, but how quickly are they actually going to learn enough to know what they need to know to be able to help you get your take rates up, right, and help you work in your customer touch points, which I think is a fair
sustaining
consideration.
customers too.
And sustaining those customers, right? Because acquiring customers and then they churn actually costs us money.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
In some ways, it was a happy problem. We wished we could combine the two into one, and but we had to choose.
Yep, and so we do. That's our recommendation. I think, and Ellie agrees with it. Is we want to proceed with London Middlebury for all of the business.
Yeah.
If you guys, this is helpful. Thank you. If you guys are comfortable with that, then I'm on board as well. When you mentioned the first two, or the top two, my initial reaction was like, yeah, let's go with the local people. So my line of thinking is kind of along the way with yours. Yeah, in my business, I dabble a little bit with marketing, so I get some of the things you're talking about in terms of industry specificity versus knowing the market geographically. So I'm on board.
Yeah. I mean, from my perspective, I could really work with either, and so yeah, I'm happy either way that we go. And I think either way, it's going to be great and refreshing to have someone that knows half of what we're not getting now, and it's going to be frustrating to have to bring someone up to speed with the other half of what they don't know. So it's probably kind of much of a muchness. Steve?
Yeah. So at the conclusion of our discussions this afternoon, there's one open item that has to be done yet. We want to do the reference checks. We've got one solid reference check that kind of came from Phil Summers in the first place, and we've got a couple other names that we want to follow up on. So that may take us a couple days, but for purposes of keeping this moving and making Ellie's life a little bit easier, I move that we award all the marketing contract to London Middlebury, pending final approval from positive results of reference checks. Is there a second? Okay, got a second from Nancy. Discussion. Okay, all in favor of proceeding per the motion, raise your hand or say aye. Excellent. The ayes have it, Ellie. Let's go.
All right. Thank you very much. And Doug, if you're still listening, whoops, Doug dropped off. So I was going to thank him for his time. Okay. All right. So next up is Maple Broadband full performance review. We have taken quite a bit of time on other items in the agenda. So how much time? I suggest we only have 2 of the 3 executive committee members here. So do you guys want to start this conversation today? Maybe we time cap it at, say, 10 minutes or something, and then we put it on next week's next meeting's agenda as well. How do you want to handle this?
Nancy and I, what this came about, because Nancy and I were talking about this, and it started out trying to figure out how we were going to proceed with the executive director performance review, and then to Nancy's point, maybe we need to take a look at how the executive committee is doing, and then what I think is the pain area, we want to take a look at what the governing board is doing, so that we can kind of understand how everyone, all the stakeholders can better contribute to the outcome we're all looking for. And so I think that was kind of the basis for the suggestion. I'm at a loss about what to do about the executive committee, to be honest with you, but I think we can certainly talk about that. But I think the one area that I think we tried to address this when we were interviewing with the marketing bidders, which is hypothetically, there's a a staff of 18 eager people that want to support Maple Broadband that are on the governing board, but we're really not leveraging them. And the one example I thought of that I was hammering on at the last meeting was taking. This is an example. It's not that important, but it would be an example of what we could do. Relieve Ellie from the responsibility of downloading all these meetings and having to upload them into YouTube. It's clerical. So hypothetically, if there's somebody on the governing board that we trust to be thorough and consistent, and they have broadband, they have Maple Broadband service, which might be self-limiting, ask them if they'd be willing to do it and take a little less work off of Ellie's shoulders. But I think, to me, it's less about that, and it's more about the fact that we're a very, very lean organization. Heavy lifting going on in the executive committee, super heavy lifting going on with just a couple of us, and nothing going on with the governing board, or essentially nothing besides participation in the meetings. And there must be more we can have them do. So go ahead, Ellie.
No, I was just going to say on that specific point, it's actually not necessarily as easy as having a governing board member do it, because in order to access the bloody thing, you need to have a Maple Broadband account, which we have to pay for on a per seat basis. So it needs to be someone that has that in order to be able to access the thing to download it.
Yeah,
But,
I know that. It's not that expensive. I mean, again, the objective is to kind of spread the work around wherever we can. And if it means paying, I don't know, what wasn't that much, like $20 a month or something like that. Come on, let's make this a little bit more level, more even assignments across the organization. That's all. It's easiest to give it to you, Ellie, because we know it's going to be done properly, and it's going to get done well, and it's going to get done fast. But I don't know. Sorry, go ahead, Nancy. You had your hand up.
Sure. When Steve and I talked about this, the way I began to think about it, I mean, we were talking about what would be a process for evaluating the executive director as we do each year. And so we worked on that, and probably the EC needs a reminder, Steve, from you about what we came to and what we should do next and how soon we should do it. But what I was saying was, in addition to that, would there be a time soon where our full executive committee could look at the organization as an organization and say, what are the challenges that we're facing here? And is there anything we should be doing differently as an organization to meet those challenges? Now, what Steve has said, I think, is certainly the main challenge I can think of, is that our staffing is very lean, and our executive director is capable of taking just about anything on without losing her mind, at least in public. But I do think that that's one example of what we might talk about when we are all together as an executive committee, and there may be other things as well.
So, Ellie, I don't know that this helps the subject matter, but maybe Nancy, is this in my former life? We used to occasionally say we need to have an offsite, and an offsite means we need to get out of our homes and we need to meet in a conference room at a hotel and start talking about these things, which is usually historically worked pretty well because all the distractions that you normally get aren't there. So what I think you're hearing is something like that. Basically, we convene with a sole subject of trying to pick this apart and figure out what works and what doesn't. So maybe that's a special meeting. I don't know.
I think it may be. It may be.
It's probably an in-person meeting is what it sounds like, because if you're discussing Maple Broadband matters, it's still a public meeting, so it still needs to be publicly warned and now recorded in the same manner as everything else. But It could be done in person, and it could be longer than an hour and a half.
Shannon, thoughts?
Yes, when we talk about leveling, the workflow and everything, and I'm sitting here going, okay, I work my regular paying job, and then I'm the chair of the planning commission for the city of Virgins, and I'm also on, the Addison County Regional Planning, and I'm on here, and I'm going, okay, what can I do? What can I offer? That doesn't mean I'm not willing to do more and help where I can. It's just a matter of how thin does that get? That being said, I think doing something where we have an in-person meeting and can really hash out things and maybe establish what those roles are and what the deficiencies are will help us figure out what the right next steps are.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. I guess I'm thinking that there is kind of there's a gating situation here where we look at the Shannons of the world who have full-time jobs and they give up their personal time to attend a meeting that's just volunteer. And there's more than one Shannon out there, like just another Shannon, right? He's got a full-time job. So, so to me, there are a handful of those on the governing board that have full-time jobs and do this as an application. And then there's, I imagine, because Nancy's off. Nancy has, I can't remember his name in the moment, but Nancy's alternate, for example, I believe he's retired. And he's engaged. He worked with you, Ellie, on the generator task group, and he was a bulldog. He was not letting things go. He was trying to get to the bottom of things. So that may be an example of a governing board member who wants to help, has some skills that could contribute to it, and there may well be more than that.
Mm-hmm.
And Nancy, I was referring to your
Rich
your
Warren.
alternate.
Rich Warren.
Rich Warren.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I think there's a couple different things here. I think that the first thing, and I really agree with what Shannon said, that I think the first thing is just to identify and understand what we think about the organization's strengths and weaknesses. And then the second thing is, how do you go about resourcing them? Because I think, there's two things. One is, yes, there may be governing board members who have more time than others, but there are challenges to having there's challenges to working with volunteers, right? Yeah. And that's, sometimes people's best intentions get ahead of their ability to actually do things in a timely manner. And the second thing is that if I'm now having to work with, say, 6 or 8 people doing little tasks, that could literally be more of a hassle for me than just doing them myself. And so I think we have to be very, if it's a small discrete task, like uploading YouTube videos, or uploading minutes, sure. But really, I think we should, before we start jumping in to solve the problem, we should make sure we identify what the problem is. And I think, to my mind, one of the things that we'd like our new marketing firm to work on is helping us harness volunteers, whether governing board or others, for marketing purposes. But that will be under the auspices of a program where we're training whatever, say 10 or 15 people to do the same thing, and that's one thing. But I'm personally more interested in, how do we use our governing board for more governance? Like, could we, could there be other review or oversight committees to help us with certain things, and what might those things be? Finance comes to mind because, we know we need a new treasurer, but it surely wouldn't, it would actually be great to have a finance committee, but we don't have a finance committee. Shannon.
Yeah, when I go through and have been working on, say, policy stuff, the first thing that I do is go look at the websites of the other CUDs, and most of them have subcommittees that are dedicated to certain aspects of that dynamic. So absolutely, we should harness that.
But with our own flavor, because yes, they do, and some of them are actually highly problematic. So I think we should, but I have a good sense for talking with other executive directors about what works well and what doesn't, and why. So, for example, off the top of my head, a finance committee would be great, a policy committee would be great, because then the executive committee doesn't have to take every single policy decision, or it could say, okay, well, we want to have bylaws, or we want to have anything that touches this. Or even the policy committee drafts it first and brings it to the executive committee, whatever. Like, we can figure out how the committees work together. But I think those are two off the top of my head that could be helpful. And not that the policy committee needs to meet regularly. It could meet once every 6 months as needed. But it would be
but
nice to be able to say what other brains are good brains at
Mhm.
challenges, and how could we better harness them?
But even prior to that, what are the shortfalls that we need the good brains for?
Right.
And I think getting our group sitting down with minimal distractions, because I have a couple of screens up, and there are times when I'm responding to an email or something like that, and I apologize for that, but it has to be done. But being in a spot where those distractions are minimized would really help us focus and maybe help us get to that end goal.
Do
Someplace with
we?
palm trees would be nice.
Yeah.
Just
Do
kidding.
we? I guess I was thinking that there something I think you had said, Ellie, and I'm not sure I quite caught it, but I think the idea is there may be some homework to do before we get together. Ask each of us a question to kind of help us attack this the right way. And I don't remember the particulars, but for example, what Shannon said was, where are we falling short? Okay, what's that list look like? And then there may be other lists that we can also try to populate. Maybe falling short's the only list we need. I don't know. I think maybe the big question to me is, what's the scope of what we do, and how can we carve it up in a way that's more efficient and respectful of people's time?
I'll do a SWOT for the organization.
Yeah.
That's could be as good and easy a place to start as anything. Everyone does their own, and then we could bring them together and see the commonalities when we get together to focus on this. And so, in particular, focus on the weaknesses.
So, throwing you under the bus here, Ellie, I'm thinking that if you send an email to the executive committee members and tasked us with that, you could task us any way you want, and then that would be kind of our homework. And then maybe what we do is at our next executive committee meeting, it would be due by then. You'd compile it perhaps, and then we'd figure out what our next steps look like.
Sounds good to me.
And if you want to do that as a draft, Ellie, and share it with me, I'd be happy to take a look at it and throw in my 2 cents before you send it.
Well, I was thinking of just asking you all to do sorry, Steve, were you asking me to draft one for you guys to edit? Or because I was thinking that I would ask everyone to do one independently, so we didn't have groupthink.
That's
Right.
what I had in mind. Yeah, that's
Okay.
what I had in mind. Is it's really, I respect your perspective, because however you want to look at it, you're kind of looking down on everything that we're doing. You've got your fingers in everything. So in a sense, you have all of us kind of really understands the scope and magnitude of what's in front of us. And so I would just like you to figure out a way to tell us what you want from us, and we'll respond, each of us individually. And then you'll compile it whenever deadline you select, and then we'll reconvene and maybe figure out where's a good place to meet, like at Adam's house or something like that.
Adam,
Wait.
you're muted. You're still muted.
I said I have lovely gardens. You're all invited.
Great. All right, so let's move on from that. Next thing up is WCPT operations, and Steve gave some of an update as to where we are in terms of the live customers earlier. I wanted to repeat in public session what we said before the meeting started, which is that I discovered kind of accidentally when the town of Waltham and another resident emailed me a few days ago saying, "We haven't heard anything from you in a few weeks. What's going on?" Town of Waltham placed their order on the 10th of June and have not yet been scouted a month later. And the other one was someone who placed an order earlier, and they responded to one of the emails from me saying, "Please add product to your order" as the next step on the 19th of June. Also have not been scouted. That's about 3 weeks ago. So raised this with Waitsfield this morning, and the answer was, we've told the scout crews to focus on the oldest orders first, but it looks like they haven't been doing it. We'll pay closer attention, which is a somewhat satisfying answer, but also a not entirely satisfying answer, because we shouldn't. Anyway, so just wanted to raise that. We're going to keep an eye on it, but it does fall under the category of things to be reported under this item. Anything you want to add, Steve?
Well, as you're aware, I just received my broadband service a couple of weeks ago, and it's been, I won't call it bumpy, but it's not been a smooth process to get from getting my broadband service to doing things like getting the billing squared away and I also experienced some what I would call lack of responsiveness from WCVT. And there's a tool that Ellie and I use when we communicate issues to WCVT. It's called Monday. It's a platform where you just document issues, and then you assign responsibility to whoever should be aware of it. So I posted that in Monday, and we got a thorough response from Kurt, who's their marketing guy. And I'm satisfied with all the responses, but I think my worry, and I think Ellie's worry as well, is this a one-off? Or is it the tip of the iceberg? We don't know. So I think we just have to have our ear to the ground, and whenever we hear something that sounds a little bit questionable, we need to follow it up any way we can, and maybe look for trends. I think perhaps Noah's work that he's doing might ultimately help us with that. I'm not quite sure how, but I think the idea is to, develop some metrics around this.
But so Steve, on the issues that you have, and that you surface with them, so that's a conversation you're going to have the next time you meet with WCVT about the question of, is this a one-off, or how can we prevent this in the future? Or how can we make it smoother for everybody?
Yeah, it was, for me, it's almost embarrassing because it feels like I'm throwing my weight around. I'm the chair, but it's just it's one experience, and I documented it carefully, and I posted it yesterday, I think. And we met with WCVT on our weekly meeting anyhow. Lee brought in Kurt. We walked through the issues I had, explained each of them. It all makes sense to me. There was well, I don't want to call it a failure, but a customer service department misstep that's going to be corrected. So ultimately, I mean, Nancy, we all make mistakes.
Yep.
How you learn. That's how you learn.
Yeah.
And so I think we're not, Ellie and I aren't saying you guys are going to get your act together. It's really more about, here's another thing. Let's fix it and make sure it doesn't happen again. That's kind of what we're doing, I think.
Okay.
So, but it's all sorted. Like I said, a lot of it was not surprising. For example, I got broadband service. They knew I wanted to get phone service too, and I still haven't gotten it. And it's been 2 weeks. And they informed me, for example, well, you were a special. We got your service real fast once your serving area was open, but it takes a lot longer to port a phone number from Consolidated over to WCVT, and we're at the mercy of those people. So WCVT broke the rule to give you fast broadband service, and this is what happened.
So they are able to give you your same phone number. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, they will. Yeah, it's only go net speed. It's only go net speed.
All right.
Yep. Okay. So I'm going to move on in the interest of time. So BEAD update. I think the big update is the one that I gave earlier about the addresses. We are still waiting on Volume 2 approval, and that is all that I have to say about that. Treasurer update. We have no updates.
Ellen, can
Yes.
I ask you one thing about BEAD and just our coordination with Waitsfield Champlain Valley Telecom on that?
Yes.
How is that going? We were just talking about coordinating with, and I know we do well with WCVT a lot of the time, but I don't know how much of this issue we've done and how much of the legal issue that we've tackled since we started working on that.
So that's a good question. So now that we have the addresses, I think we're all in the same boat of needing to do some analysis and then figuring out where that takes us. So that's one of the things I want to raise with Roger next week. Monday is great. We've got the addresses. I presume they have them too, actually. I mean, I should maybe send them our KMZ and say, hey, just in case you don't have these plotted, here's where they are, just so that they do have them. Let me actually make a note of that. Because yes, you're quite right, Adam. In order to pull together an application, we need to make sure that we have one comprehensive application, like, one bid and one cybersecurity plan and one this and one that, and all those other things. And to some degree, not spending too much time worrying about the things that we don't know the details on, because until the volume 2 is approved, we're not going to know the program rules. Until the volume 2 is approved, we're not going to have, the VCB won't be able to publish its request for application. And so we won't know exactly what questions we have to answer. So I think that when that happens, it's going to focus all of our minds on, okay, here's the questions we need to answer. How are we going to answer this as one entity? But the two work paths that we've started down, one is the network management agreement, the legal bit. So the BEAD specific part of that has to wait again until the volume 2 is approved and we understand the exact rules that have to be complied with. And the general part of that, the cleanup of the document, is in progress. We came up with a list of, I don't know, there was 18 or 20. There was actually a pretty sizable list of just conceptual things that we wanted to make sure that we were on the same page with Roger. Went over them and he agreed with all of them in concept, which it's going to be a different thing when you see a red line potentially. But where we've left it is, we're gonna keep our lawyers out of it as much as we can. So obviously, we're working with our counsel to advise us, but I'm going to produce a red line for the ones I can. I'm going to pass to our lawyer to do a red line for some of the legalistic things. I mean, there's some things on there where, for example, the way that certain clauses worked was mutually incompatible with each other, and in the event there's ever a problem, you just don't want that. It's a legal cleanup kind of thing. So I'm going to do my part. Alan's going to do his part, and then we're going to just send over a consolidated version to WCVT that anonymizes the authors, just so that it's not, there's no weirdness when it comes to that. And then we will have a discussion with Roger on that red line. But basically, we're tackling this as the first set of changes as things that we should do anyway, regardless of BEAD, just to clean up and improve our agreement because we got some money. And then we've absolutely already started that, and the hope is that will be well in progress when volume 2 is approved, and then we can start the second layer, which is the BEAD layer. So that's what's going on with that. And the accounting one has not started because, first of all, we didn't schedule a kickoff meeting because we thought Sai might have. She seemed to think she was close to having some treasurer candidates, but they both fell through. And then I didn't hear from. I think Julie at Barry Dunn is on vacation, and now Sai's on vacation. So, and I'm not even sure when Sai's back from vacation, so I don't want to set something up until I know that everyone's going to be available. So the accounting bit hasn't started yet, and I'm starting to get a little bit antsy about that, but it is vacation season, and I can't very well set meetings when the principal people aren't around. So that's where we are with all those things.
Yeah.
Does that help?
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
I think that, and the other part from my perspective is at a higher level is that this is all about, getting our hands on some more funds to do construction for, expand the construction, expand availability to subscribers in our area. So when Ellie got the addresses sorted out, we were in the starting block. And now that we have that, there's lots of things that happen. Ellie and I just talked earlier today about an RFP process, a process to go through and identify an engineer that's going to do this work, do the design work associated with BEAD. So there's multiple paths that are following from this. I think to Adam's question, I think one thing I'm worried about, but that we really can't deal with right now, is that I think if they could, WCBT would not be applying for this. I don't think they want to do it, but they have to because it's our district. Basically, this is Maple Broadband. So the Maple Broadband towns, that's a lot of WCBT real estate. So whether they want to or not, we're administering the award, assuming we get an award, and we're going to be awarding them funds based on what they're going to do. So they've got to step up and participate with us. I think that's something we'll have to just kind of keep an eye on.
I mean, it's interesting, Steve, because I do get the same sense, but I'm just sharing quickly my screen, which is the BEAD map here. And there's also these pins are BEAD eligible addresses. And there's a heck of a lot of pins in WCVT territory. And some of these are mistakes because even though they should have done it, and I thought that they had done it, a lot of these are in areas that were grant funded as part of WCVT's ARPA grant. Over here, all the stuff in Addison, Panton, Bridport, and Weybridge is obviously all ARPA funded. So obviously there's some errors in here. But if you look at Starksboro, Lincoln, Moncton, there's a lot of unserved addresses right now. So I guess it'll be interesting to see what their actual BEAD bid cost is.
And yeah, a lot to do. Ellie has her hands full. I mean,
Yeah.
there's, and again, because she's not focusing on one thing, she can't. There's like multiple threads that she has to work at kind of concurrently. She has to keep pushing them all forward. So,
Yep.
So Ellie, is it? Do you know whether WCVT went through those lists and submitted all of their? Okay, they did.
I know that they went through and they challenged. I mean, they went through the process of challenging all the addresses that the VCB already knew were ARPA funded, and this was still the result. So God only knows. But
What does that mean?
well, the other thing, yeah, when Ellie and I were talking about this earlier today, the other thing is that the bead map shows service in the middle of a cornfield. So it's bad information. It's not the only yellow pin that's bogus. And so part of what needs to be done, as described by Ellie, is we got to comb through those, and a lot of it's just running the roads, find out if there really is something in that cornfield, and then look at every one of those locations just like that, and clean up the map further. And I think that may, if I were WCVT, I'd feel like I've got to do the same thing. There may be a lot of bogus information in there, and the only way to identify that at this point, and Ellie doesn't even know the rules for that, is compile a list of ones that we think are bogus, submit it to the VCBB, and then within a couple of weeks they'll come back with us and say, that's not at all what we want. You're going to have to change it all. So it's just...
Well, it's not even that easy because it's not up to them. It's up to the NTIA to define whether or not something is a broadband serviceable location based on this cost quest fabric. And I mean, it's the subject of a lot of national debates and jokes, as I'm sure you guys are all aware. That there's trailheads that are broadband serviceable locations and abandoned houses that are broadband serviceable locations and all sorts of things like that. And clearly, at the end of the day, sanity will prevail because no one wants to be building fiber to nowhere, because any political opponent will be thumping on the table and saying this is a waste of federal funds. So I'm sure that a waiver process will emerge, but I would like us to gather, I'd like us, again, as Steve was saying, to get a bit ahead of it and gather what information and evidence seems reasonable to us, so that when guidance comes out, we don't have to turn around in 3 days.
Are all the pins tied to 911 addresses?
No. Nope. This is the FCC's database, which is from CostQuest. It is not tied to E911.
I mean, wouldn't that be the way to do it?
You could tell that to the federal government.
I'm starting to think I'm in the middle of a Kafka novel.
But for us, couldn't we try and apply 911 addresses to their database somehow?
The Stone Environmental has already done that to match up as many as possible. And it's actually an interesting question. I could ask them, do they have a layer they could share of the things that are not E911 addresses? Because that might be a nice filter to see the likely bogus stuff. So thank you for that, actually. Let me or even Lucas, the GIS consultant. Okay, I'm going to move on because I do want to try to get us ended on time. Parking lot, we have added to the parking lot the Middlebury hub search, and I'm actually going to add as well the Ripton hub search. I've started that just today, but started. Is there anything else in the parking lot anyone wants to discuss?
This is another example of what we're talking about. Just like we've got the addresses, we immediately need to start looking for hubs. We need to immediately start looking for where we're going to put splitter cabinets. All that stuff can commence now to one degree or another. So there's a lot of work to do.
You can take number 12 off.
I'm going to for our process. I'm going to mark it on strike through, and then the next published agenda, I'm with an update saying that it passed, and the next published agenda, I'll take it off. Okay. All right, updates, financial. I don't have. I know I don't have any financial updates because we just had the governing board meeting 2 days ago. So you guys heard the download there and Si's on vacation. Marketing. Okay, well we've talked about my excitements to move on from our current crew. Steve?
One thing that I heard that I wasn't aware of, and it doesn't matter a heck of a lot. It don't matter. I don't know, but I know when we first started doing marketing, Dan had hooked us up with MailerLite, which is the tool we're using for our newsletters right now. And at least based on your comments, it's not fun. It's not an easy and simple tool, and it's got a lot of weaknesses. And I know you'd mentioned recently that you're talking about moving to MailChimp. I guess the only thing I was curious about is I expect that Dan cooked up MailerLite because it was the cheapest thing he could find that looked like it would work.
Mm-hmm.
What's the delta between MailChimp and MailerLite in terms of cost?
About $500 a year, 450.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So is that what you're going to do for sure?
That
MailChimp?
that's well, Noah had a look, and because I mean, he had a look, and you can report on what else you looked at if you want to. One of the key things is it needed to have an integration with Zapier, which is an automation kind of software, because one of the things we want to use this for is not only the mailing list, but also to trigger automatic emails out of CrowdFiber when people's statuses change. Like, for example, from, Scout is unset to Scout complete. And one of the other things I'm hoping we can do is that we can use Zapier to be able to start to pull more information than what we can get out of CrowdFiber directly, so that we can start to run our own queries to see if someone sits in a current state longer than Scout complete unset for longer than 2 weeks. We can identify that, but that's unrelated to the mailing list software. So, but it's time critical for that reason, because in order to start sending the customer service emails that we've talked about and have drafted and have had ready for a while, we want to do it in an automated manner and not like start doing it in one thing or do it manually. We want to get in a proper system and do it. And so I'm happy with MailChimp. Noah's happy with MailChimp. And what I said to you, Steve, 2 days ago is, okay, we're 2 days away from picking a marketing firm. Let's pick the marketing firm and then ask them if they have any concerns just before we go ahead and like sign up for a year and then be like, oh shoot, we actually should have used, whatever. Let's just wait 2 more days and get our marketing firm's blessing on it. So that's my plan.
Is
Also,
Zapier?
while we're on the subject of the marketing firm, just a reminder to let everyone know, I don't know that we know yet when London Middlebury is going to want to, when they'll be starting exactly, or what their first moves are, but I imagine at some point fairly soon they're going to want to have either be collecting information from the executive committee members or want to meet with us all at a regular meeting. So I'm sure Ellie and Steve will keep us posted on when that will happen.
Yep. How we wrote the RFPs, the strategy bit would happen essentially upon it, like immediately after selection, and which I think aligns with the availability of the principal as well, who'd be working on this, and then the monthly bit will start from August.
Ellie, you mentioned Zapier. Is that a module in MailChimp or is it a separate platform?
It's a separate platform. It's an automation platform.
Is that something we're buying too then?
Yep. I don't know the cost on that yet. Is it not? Is it? Noah, you're shaking your head.
No, you're probably right. I thought it was integrated with CrowdFiber, but no, I think you're right.
Yeah, it's a third party software.
Okay. Well, I imagine that your approval threshold will allow you to proceed with it without getting us all pulled in. But I think I'd like to know when you have it. I'd like to know what we're paying. Like for example, we talked to a couple of weeks ago about joining regional commerce, chamber of commerce, and Ellie has already done that. So
yep,
we're good.
Yep. Okay. All right. So that's marketing. I think the only other thing I want to talk about on marketing is we know that Field Days is coming up. So as discussed at the governing boards, we're going to be sharing a booth with WCVT again. So WCVT has offered to come by my house and collect things and set up that booth and so on, which is great. And need to work to get, we have, I wanted to reprint on some of the marketing collateral that we have that has the products and the pricing, because I don't know how many of those that we have. That'll be a quick thing we can get from Little Press Room. And then I asked Pivot if it's possible to have a map that actually shows where we have service areas, but with an underlay map, people can actually recognize where the heck it is. Because the map they did last year wasn't really very useful in that regard. So like less artsy and more useful for identifying if there's actually service where you are. So I basically said, because I said I want to have a design done by the end of next week to make sure that we can actually get the thing printed and not be in a rush, because it seems like every year at Field Days with Pivot, there's a rush for things that we started weeks ago. So if they can get the design done by next week Friday, we'll have a map. And if they don't, I'm not going to be sweating bullets over it, because I don't want to be rushing around at the last minute again. That's all that I have on marketing. VCBB and Vacuda. I did give a lot of this update at the governing board meeting already, so I won't repeat it. The one thing I will add, because this came out after that, is the VCBB, as I may or may not have reported, but one of the things they've been working on is tallying up the original. So this is the ARPA allocations under the Broadband Construction Grant Program. They have been going through and seeing, because every entity, whether CUD or town that's not in a CUD, had an allocation under that program, and at the request of their board, as pushed by Vacuda, staff has been going back to identify how much of that allocation is actually, either has already been granted, or has someone put up their hands to say, yes, we are definitely going to be using that, and we'll get our application in according to a time frame. So the amount that's left, and this could be from towns that aren't part of CUDs or CUDs that aren't using everything, but whatever, the amount that's left is all of $2.6 million, which is not a lot of money. And the VCBB has put out a formal request to stakeholders, and including us, to go back to them by next week, Tuesday, with our top 3 ideas about what to do with that money. And so I wanted to put it out here just in case anyone has any brilliant ideas. Right now I have one and only one idea, which is that they allocated according to the same formula that they allocated the original broadband construction grants. So, we got plus minus, I think we got, there's 245 million and we got 21 million, give or take. So a little bit under 10%, like 8%. So if we were to get 8% of $2.6 million, that would be about $230,000, something like that. So, not a lot to be building broadband with. So my suggestion is give it to, or distribute it to CUDs according to that same formula, to be used specifically as a drop fund, regardless of anything else, to be used as a drop fund in order to connect people and build revenue. Because, as we all know, we have 100+ people waiting on buried drops, a lot of whom probably won't ever put in the buried drop. And so the idea here is to cover any customer charges above and beyond the standard installation fee. So that would be buried service, that would be long drops, anything like that. $200,000 would go a long way towards helping us break down the barriers for people who can't afford, or for people who have buried service who otherwise simply will not convert to our service.
And that would be for any customer, regardless of ability to pay.
Well, that is my suggestion. Yeah, of any customer.
Yeah, and so you and I kicked this around about conduit, Ellie, forever. I think that the question is translating, grant dollars into paying for conduit. I don't know quite how we would do that. It doesn't mean we couldn't do it, but I don't know how we could do it. And for example, could we hand it all to one contractor? It seems like there's a lot of complexity there that could be problematic. But having said all that, I love your idea, and from my perspective, maybe there's smarter people than us that can find a way to do it that's doesn't create complexity that we can't afford.
Yeah, just two other quick comments. One is that the BEAD program does cover drops, and as a matter of fact, in order to install someone within 10 days, you actually kind of need to put in the drop ahead of time. So this is another thing, is that in order to have there be more parity between parts of the network that are ARPA funded versus BEAD funded, you actually kind of need such a thing. Otherwise, it becomes extremely unfair. Like, why does someone in one town get their drop paid for and someone in another town doesn't? Try and explain that. That's not easy. And the other thing is it puts us on a similar playing field to our ILEC competition, which itself has to do this, because if they're the phone company, they're the carrier of last resort, and if they don't want to do direct buried, so I hear that at least one of our competitors is using direct buried, but they do that at their own risk, I suppose.
Yep. That's all that they were doing 20 or 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Just dig a trench, drop the cable in the trench, backfill it, and you're on your way.
Yep. Yeah, until the lawnmower or the next frost heave, but whatever.
Yep.
So anyway, so I'm putting that out there. If anyone has any other ideas, because I think this is one where we can explain the need in terms of parity, we can explain the need in terms of how this would help us build revenue, and we could quantify it. But if anyone has any other ideas about what we might do with $200,000, and the other rule, of course, is it's capital projects. So we couldn't, for example, use this as a subsidy fund. It has to go to capital projects. And even if we could, I wouldn't want to. I'd want to use it on capital and use our operating revenues, which don't need to be spent by a certain time.
And
It
Ellie,
sounds good, Ellie. You'll be talking to the other CUDs about what ideas they have on this as well.
Yeah, we will. I mean, I think that Vacuda has decided that because different CUDs have different opinions on this. I think the CCI CUDs have a different opinion. EC Fiber wants it all for itself. So basically Vacuda has said we're not going to agree. CUDs will come up with their own ideas. So I'll chat to one or two others and see if they have some brilliant ideas that we may all want to submit.
Yep.
but Ellie, 200,000 gets us basically 200 drops, plus or minus. Is that right?
Is $1,000 a drop?
Yeah. Is
Let's
that
see.
reasonable? Which would get us, I guess where I'm going is that gets us over our 500 critical mass.
Yeah, I'm
I think that
honestly not sure. I'm honestly not sure the average buried drop length, Adam. I mean, it might be. I'd say somewhere between 50 and 100.
You think it would get us somewhere between 50 and 100, so you think it's a lot more expensive than that?
Well, it's kind of the thumb suck I go with is about $15 a foot, and so if you take $1,000, which would be the allocation, if it's 200,000 divided by 200, that's 66 feet. So I don't know. I think some of the buried drops are longer than that. Some are short and some are much longer. So that's why I'm being a little bit cagey. If you have someone with a very long drop, it might, and we'd probably need to put some rules around the program ourselves. Like, we're not going to let someone with a 500-foot drop get their entire conduit paid for. Like, we might pay up to $1,000 or $1,500. We can figure out the details if this is what it gets used for. So anyway, if you have any other brilliant ideas, feel free to drop me an email.
And if nobody gives you any suggestions on that, Ellie, you're going to proceed with your suggestion.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Affordability, I have no update now, but there's some meetings early next week, so I hope to have a more interesting update the next time we meet. And the CCI docket, there is an update on that, which is that we had a hearing yesterday. It started at 9:30 a.m. and ended like 2 minutes after noon or something like that. So I was a witness at that. I was the last witness. It wasn't clear whether I'd be cross-examined by the Consolidated and Condor attorneys. In the end, they chose not to. So most of the hearing was taken up with cross-examination of witness Schultz, who was the representative from CCI, and I think the Vacuda attorney did quite a good job cross-examining him, all things considered. What Vacuda is pushing for is an MOU with CCI, which is substantially similar to the one that we have with Green Mountain Power, whereby the parties will play nicely together around Make Ready, because there are big delays with CCI Make Ready. So this hits other CUDs like NEK and Northwest much worse than it does us, because they have a lot more CCI polls. And we honestly don't know what CCI polls we might encounter as part of BEAD or future builds, because there's no comprehensive electronic database to know what assets they actually have, which is a whole other story. But anyway, that hearing was finished, and the next step is 3 weeks from when the transcription is available, which I guess will be in a day or two. So basically about 3 weeks from tomorrow, I would imagine, is when the parties have to give their final legal submissions, and then the PUC goes and deliberates and decides what it's going to do, which is guaranteed they're going to approve the transaction. It's really just a question of whether or not they put a condition on CCI to work with Fukuda to put together an MOU, or whether they decide to pick and choose a couple of specific requirements and make them conditions, or if they choose to do none of that. So that's that. Any questions?
This was Vakuda's, I guess, condition while we had CCI on the witness stand because two members are partnering with CCI.
So the background here is, so CCI is being acquired in its entirety by private equity. So
Right.
Vakuda, as well as about 5 other CUDs registered as interveners in order to be able to participate and comment. And then the PUC directed Vakuda and the CUDs to join their testimony together. So, I mean, some of the intervening CUDs were CCI partners. Some of the intervening CUDs were not CCI partners. And so our testimony throughout has been a split of here's what the partner CUDs need and here's what the non-partner CUDs need. And the cross-examination that was done yesterday was specifically only for the non-CCI partners. It had to do with make-ready concerns.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay. Other business. Is there any other business anyone wants to raise? All right. Hearing none, our next meeting 2 weeks from today is the 25th of July. Hopefully that works for Shannon.
If you have quorum needs, let me know. Otherwise, I will not be present. I'm going to be on the coast of Maine.
Oh, good for you.
And I've promised my wife to limit or eliminate all meetings that week. But if you need me for quorum, I will make time.
Ellie, our discussions earlier today, we were thinking we might want to have a decision in hand about our engineering firm by then, or am I mistaken?
That's what we were aiming for, but that was without a knowledge of whether or not our engineering firms could respond that quickly, and at least one of them may struggle to do because of vacations. So maybe what we should do is push the meeting to the first week in August so that Shannon could attend, and that would give our engineering firms a little bit longer to come back with their proposals. What do you guys think?
The only worry I have is that I think based on what I'm hearing Jeff say, he's not going to be able to attend every meeting. Perhaps you issue an email and say, we could either meet on, these are the 3 choices of dates. When do you want to meet? When can you meet? We'd like to get quorum. We'd like to get everybody on the call or something like that, and then we can back into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because, and Shannon, if you're not on the coast of Maine, if it winds up being that week and we're choosing an engineering firm, we could send a brief in the board pack and you could read and give your thoughts via email. You obviously couldn't vote, but you could at least make your opinion known.
Yeah. Absolutely. But I mean, just to be clear, if you need me there, then I will be there then. But I'd rather not.
Okay. Well, let me ask Jeff.
Yeah, I've already told Adam that I'm not going to the e-board meeting the night before, so.
Okay. Well, let me ask Jeff if he's amenable to August 1st, because if he is, that would obviously work for you.
Yeah. And but I'll do whatever's necessary. Just know that.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you. Is there anything else then?
I move we adjourn.
All right. Thank you all. See you all
Thanks.
in 2 or 3 weeks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay. Thank you.